Greetings, good morning. I'm Sara Flounders. I'll be chairing this opening session. I'm proud to be part of the Friends of Socialist China. We're holding events yesterday in London and today here in New York. The Friends of Socialist China has provided a valuable framework to explain China's most important contributions. I'm also part of the International Action Center and a contributing editor of Workers' World newspaper. So to everyone in the hall here today, this beautiful Malcolm X Betty Shabazz Education Center, we can see these magnificent murals on the walls, the educational displays everywhere. Malcolm X's support and defense of China during a time of total US blockade is so well known around the world. But here, the powers that be want to bury that memory and this center. This is the site where Malcolm X was assassinated 60 years ago this year. We also give greetings to the hundreds who are watching on Zoom and all those on the restream, the YouTube of Friends of Socialist China, Workers' World Party, International Manifesto, and this will be streamed many other places. Now, the US Congress just approved 25 new anti-China laws last few days in bipartisan votes, Democrat and Republican, and $1.6 billion to pay for a wave of anti-China propaganda. That's its purpose. So Cold War fervor is really reaching a fever pitch. And today is a united program of many organizations. I hope everyone has this beautiful brochure, well-known activists and writers who are determined to defend China. I want to start by saying we are so honored to open today's program celebrating the People's Republic of China's 75th anniversary with two friends who are here from the Chinese consulate, Yang Zhu, the Vice Consul of the Chinese Consulate, and Fu Hao, Vice Consul. Thank you for being here, for honoring us. We're going to start today with several messages from Palestine. This is a resistance that has galvanized the whole world. And in opening, I'll say that the whole world is denouncing the genocide in Gaza, this unrelenting assault now on Lebanon. This genocide, and that's the word the whole world is using, is painfully exposed in tens of thousands of photos and videos and reports and images of a charred landscape. But Biden, Harris, Trump, the US Congress, both political parties, the US corporate media have forcibly banned the very mention of the word genocide in Gaza. It's banned from the corporate-owned social media. There's total censorship, total. They vote tens of billions in additional weapons and aid to the Zionist settler regime to continue this very public genocide. $8 billion additional just this week. But Congress, Biden, Harris, Trump all agree that in Xinjiang, autonomous region in Western China, there's a secret genocide, they claim, taking place based on evidence provided by CIA organizations. They have imposed rounds of sanctions, billions of new weapons, billions in media funding to promote this lie about Xinjiang in China. Now, no country of the 57 members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation agrees with the US propaganda on Xinjiang.
The Lebanese people
not
have
one
just experienced.
Not one country of those 57 countries accepts this story of genocide in Xinjiang. No member states of the Arab League, of 22 Arab states, agrees with this US propaganda. These Arab states and the 57 Islamic countries support the peaceful development in Xinjiang today. And I'll say I've been to Xinjiang and I've seen the healthy children and the harmonious society being built, and we'll hear more on this today. I've also been to Gaza, to Lebanon, to Syria, to Iraq, and seen the horror, the destruction of US bombs, the impact of US sanctions, and seen the hungry and displaced children. So I personally and deeply agree with China and with the Arab states and with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So there are two sides. Who do you believe and where do you stand? The imperialist countries pump up one story relentlessly again and again to justify a war mobilization against China, all while they refuse to recognize the real genocide in Gaza and now in Lebanon. And they fund it again and again. So who do you believe, the whole global South or the imperialist war machine? We defend Palestine and Lebanon, the axis of resistance, and China, who sides with these countries under attack. So we're going to open this with a message from the Chinese ambassador to the United Nations, Fu Cong, who is speaking at the UN defending Lebanon. So our first message of the day.
In decades, thousands of communication devices were detonated simultaneously via remote control, causing heavy casualties of innocent civilians. China once again condemns such unscrupulous and indiscriminate attacks. While the Lebanese people were still reeling from the shock, bombs rained down from the sky. Israel launched multiple rounds of large-scale airstrikes on southern and eastern Lebanon, leading to over 500 deaths and close to 2,000 injuries. China is seriously concerned about the current situation between Lebanon and Israel, firmly supports Lebanon in defending sovereignty, security, and national dignity, and strongly condemns acts that violate the basic norms governing international relations.
I'm next asked to read, this is a message from the organizing committee of today's conference. The organizers of the China at 75 conference in New York City condemn the Israeli state massacre of the Lebanese people and the assassination of Secretary General Saeed Hassan Nasrallah during a massive bombing attack on the Beirut suburb. And this was the awful news of yesterday. At the same time, we condemn the US government and the Biden administration for its complicity in this war crime and in the ongoing genocidal attacks on the people of Gaza. Specifically, we condemn Washington for supplying arms to the terrorist Israeli state and providing diplomatic cover for Israeli war crimes in the United Nations. Washington is promoting a drive toward war in West Asia, in Ukraine, and in the South China Seas. Our celebration of 75 years of Chinese revolution must call attention to and mobilize to stop these crimes in West Asia and expand Israeli crimes throughout the region that threaten to blow up those other hotspots in the world. So this is a message from the organizers of today. We next want to hear messages from 3 Palestinian resistance organizations. These messages will be read by Richie Moreno from Bronx Anti-War, Workers' World, and by Lee from Freedom Road Socialist Organization.
Hello. This is a message from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Dear comrades, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, DFLP, Department of Foreign Affairs, sends its greetings to the participants and hopes the success of the conference on the 75th anniversary of the founding of China, known for defending the cause of the Palestinian people who face an Israeli colonial and apartheid regime, which commits massacres and crimes against the Palestinian people, which sponsored dialogue between the Palestinian factions to achieve internal unity and consensus on a Palestinian government, with the aim of stopping projects related to the future of the Gaza Strip that do not reflect the ambitions of the Palestinian people. DFLP appreciates your struggle in defending the rights of the Palestinian people stipulated in international legitimacy resolutions, specifically their right to self-determination and ending the Israeli occupation of their lands based on the decision of the International Court of Justice and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital and the return of refugees to their homes in accordance with Resolution 194. The Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, DFLP, points out the necessity of sustaining the relationship between us in order to defend the interests of the people and confront global imperialism that contributes to the destruction of societies and countries, as well as with all leftist parties that are struggling to reach this goal. DFLP hopes to continue to provide your permanent political support to the Palestinian people and the just Palestinian cause. Yes.
Addressing the Beijing meeting, Jamil Mezer, Deputy Secretary General of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, said in part that China has proven through its long history its steadfast support for the Palestinian cause, through its political and diplomatic stances and its support for the Palestinian people in international forums. What is required today is a unified Palestinian stance that clearly declares that we are all united behind the goals of our people in achieving freedom, self-determination, the return of refugees, and realizing the dream of a Palestinian state with Al-Quds, Jerusalem, as its capital. It is essential to announce the restoration of Palestinian national unity, uniting our forces and people and the Palestine Liberation Organization as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people through the convening of a unifying Palestinian National Council with the participation and representation of all Palestinian forces. Today, our people are not only facing a genocide war, but also the consequences of decades of comprehensive political failure and deficiency, as well as the price of international bias led by the United States and supported by all governments and tools of the dominant colonial system in this world. Our urgent and pressing demand is not only to end and stop the genocide, but to secure our people's rights to freedom, self-determination, the right of refugees, and the establishment of an independent state with Al-Quds as its capital. Peoples have never achieved their rights through blame, contention, and disputes over descriptions and conflicting wills, rather by uniting around major national goals, deeply understanding the meaning of historical responsibility, and having leadership capable of bearing responsibility and translating popular will. This is our duty today. Is there a stronger and more precious incentive than 40,000 Palestinian martyrs? Being united in the face of this aggression is the only guarantee to achieve our major national goals. Let us work with all our strength and sincerity to achieve this goal, knowing that history will not forgive the complacent and our people will not forgive those who fail in their national and humanitarian duty. Let us pledge today before our people and the martyrs of this nation that this moment will be the beginning of a journey towards freedom, independence, the state, and the return of refugees, and let our unity be the strongest weapon in facing this oppressive enemy.
Hussain Badran, head of Hamas's National Relations Office and a member of the Hamas Political Bureau, confirmed that the Beijing Declaration is an additional positive step towards achieving Palestinian national unity. Its significance stems from the location and the host country, as we are talking about the People's Republic of China with its international weight and steadfast support for the Palestinian cause. In his press statement, Badran expressed his high appreciation for the substantial efforts made by China to reach this declaration. They are moving in this path for the first time with their weight and stature, which is something we need as Palestinians to face the unilateral policies pursued by the United States regarding the Palestinian cause. The U.S. administration stands above any internal Palestinian national consensus and is entirely biased, even being partners with the occupation in its crimes against our people.
These were statements. These were statements made in Beijing at a meeting of all the Palestinian organizations. Where else in the world is such a meeting possible? Next up, we want to hear a wonderful message from the Vice President of the Association for Cuba-China Friendship. It was sent to us in Spanish. It'll be read in English by Mairead Gillis, who participated in the Venceremos Brigade to Cuba. Mairead?
Hello, everyone. So again, this is a statement written by Mr. Eduardo Regalado Florido of the Association of Cuba-China Friendship and head of the China Research Project of the International Policy Research Center. In an event on peace and solidarity, it is extremely fair and even necessary to raise our voice in favor of the People's Republic of China. China has developed a Belt and Road Initiative where it intends to deepen the collaboration between different nations with the purpose of eliminating and resolving the intense conflict that exists on the international scene. China has also proposed a global civilization initiative where countries collaborate, where there is a dialogue between cultures. The key elements of this scenario are peace and development. Everything it has achieved to date is the product of the actions of its Communist Party, a party committed to the entire population with the country, a party with a conception of inclusion within development. China, with its initiatives, is converting the world into a place where the interchanges bring more opportunities to the less technologically advanced countries. China's entire foreign policy is focused on building a multipolar world where multilateralism is developed, where the hegemonic powers do not impose their selfish interests, where the remaining countries, those with fewer possibilities, are included. On the African continent, much of what has been built is due to China's collaboration, including large infrastructure works, bridges, and roads. China is making its collaboration with Africa tangible, as it is also doing with Latin America and with other regions of the world. As a result of the achievements that China is making, there is no shortage of campaigns and perverse slander against this country. There's a great emphasis on highlighting China as the new imperialism. But China is a country that has improved its internal situation, and it is also improving the situation in the international environment. As long as the Chinese Communist Party continues to achieve these results, It will be excellent for the Chinese population, and it will also be excellent for the rest of the world. Relations between Cuba and China, as it is systematically repeated by the leaders, are relations between friends, between siblings, between comrades. We are very motivated by what China is going to continue to achieve in this attempt to build a modern country in an integral and socialist way, which is very different from Western modernization. China's modernization is characterized by putting the human being in the center of society and by promoting inclusion and development, by encouraging all countries to participate in the progress of science and technology for a harmonious relationship between humans and nature. Long live the People's Republic of China.
That's the kind of international solidarity there is everywhere in the world. We'd next like to hear from a senator from Pakistan, a chair of the Pakistan-China Institute, Musahid Hussain, who's speaking on the achievements he has seen in 50 years of visits to China.
Friends and comrades, greetings from Islamabad. First of all, my heartiest congratulations on the 75th anniversary of the establishment of the People's Republic of China, a landmark event in human history. And I'm so glad that the Friends of Socialist China are celebrating this event in London as well as in New York. My heartfelt felicitations to all our friends who are gathered here in London as well as in New York. When we celebrate the Chinese Revolution, this epoch-making development led by the Communist Party of China under the great leadership of Chairman Mao, we also need to analyze some of its track record of success, of achievements, and what has been the world's largest country. I personally have been very fortunate that out of these 75 years, I have been a witness to 50 of these years. Because 50 years ago, when I was a teenager, I was 17 years old, when I first went to China as head of a youth friendship group between Pakistan and China. And I have seen China in the first phase of the revolution under Chairman Mao, Premier Zhou Enlai, Marshal Chude. Then I've seen the phase of reform and opening up under the great leader, Deng Xiaoping. And now I'm seeing firsthand the rise of China. So revolution, reform, and rise. These three phases I've seen personally. And in the last 50 years, I've traveled over 100 times to China, different cities, different parts, different stages, different periods. And the turnaround in China is amazing. It's unprecedented in human history. And many a time I'm asked, what are the reasons for the China success story? What are the ingredients of this success story? I would say there are a number of these which I'd like to briefly list. Number one, the quality of leadership, which was produced by the Communist Party of China during all these phases, and very difficult phases, because China faced a lot of opposition from imperialism, a lot of opposition from hegemonism in the region, and as a socialist country upholding the banner of Marxism-Leninism, it was not easy for China to survive in that period when it was relatively weak, it was relatively poor, and it was isolated. But I'm proud to say that one of the countries that stood by China consistently in the last 60 years, since we developed that special relationship with China, has been Pakistan. So the first ingredient, quality of leadership. Second, willingness to do a course correction, which they did. They opened up, they reformed, they moved on, they started people-centric development, lifting 800 million people out of poverty. Then also, another key element, continuity of policy through different periods, different decades. And then also another important element of the China success story, a humility and a willingness to learn from others. Deng Xiaoping went on his first tour abroad after assuming the leadership of the Communist Party of China in 1978. He went to Singapore, a small island state, but he wanted to learn from the Singapore success story. And finally, I think in terms of the ingredients of the China success story, a peaceful foreign policy. China is the only country in the world that has risen without conquest, without colonization, without invasion, without aggression, without occupation. And I think this is also quite remarkable. And when we see in the current epoch, there is a historic change. What President Xi Jinping rightly says, once in a century changes. The global center of gravity is shifting from the west to the east. The American century has come to an end. And we are seeing the dawn of the Asian century. And in that, the rise of China is something that we in the global south welcome warmly, because this is a source of strength to small and medium countries. And China has led with development. The Belt and Road Initiative is the biggest developmental and diplomatic initiative of the 21st century. And Pakistan, through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is the flagship of this BRI, is one of the major beneficiaries of China's people-centered development. And friends and comrades, when we are discussing events in the world, we see two contrasting narratives. The United States of America still has a security-centric, military-dominated worldview based on militarization of international relations, based on a Cold War mentality, based on containment, which we reject, because that would be debilitating and destabilizing for the global south. Conversely, China is presenting a narrative of connectivity and cooperation. And that is why the Belt and Road Initiative is so popular. And finally, I'd like to say that those who talk of China in negative terms, they better read The Economist, which is published from London. The story which came on 15th of June, and the cover story was China, the scientific superpower. That China is now leading in science and technology. And this has also been documented in the recent study done by Harvard University, the great tech rivalry, China versus the United States. So we welcome China's development in that context. That development serves the interests of humankind. China is leading in globalization, in climate change, in promoting peace, development, connectivity, and economic cooperation. And we feel that supporting China, being a partner with China, is being on the right side of history. Thank you so much.
Well, I'd next like to present my view on why defense of China must include its socialist character and the role of the Communist Party of China. The US imperialist ruling class is waging an ideological assault on people's China. To combat the propaganda, we must expose the reason for this extraordinary hostility to China. The class differences of the two countries' social systems. China's emergence is a world-scale game changer with its Belt and Road initiatives to 150 countries, the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement, the BRICS Plus. China has become a shield, an alternative to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank with their brutal structural adjustment, deregulation, privatization programs. The Africa Summit held in Beijing, the meeting of the Palestinian organizations in Beijing, confirms this. China ended poverty for 800 million people, something that is beyond the power of any capitalist country. Life expectancy is higher today in China than in the United States, and China's growth in living standards is leading the world. So US imperialism is doubling down. Both Democrats and Republicans agree. The Pentagon agrees, NATO agrees for new sanctions, new tariffs, new rounds of propaganda directed at China. And they're aimed at, and they all say this, preparing for war by 2025. We should take this seriously. In the Pacific Ocean and the South China Sea, US strategists are rushing to construct a NATO-like military alliance. Every arm of the imperialist colossus is planning for this war. Vicious propaganda, expanding military budgets, relentless war games, military maneuvers. So this is a valuable meeting, online and here today, because political movements, parties, and organizations of the working class that take sides in the global class struggle are the most valuable anchor to withstand the crises confronting the working class and all oppressed people. Without this anchor, workers and activists are cast adrift in the onslaught of each imperialist flood. China's gains hold a liberating potential for humanity. If we can explain the reason for US imperialism's hostility and why Washington calls Beijing the greatest threat, we strengthen popular resistance to the US war drive. So we urgently need to take the defense of China to a higher level. Imperialist divide and rule tactics are intended to throw dissension and demoralization into our ranks. And voices in all the imperialist centers are united in slandering China by calling it an imperialist country. They say it's no different from past imperialist looters. This constantly repeated propaganda attacks can make the slander stick. So it's important to underline the class difference between people's China and the US. In a capitalist country, totally owned for the benefit of corporate billionaires, the CEOs and board of directors must base their decisions on maximizing profits, or they lose their position. US federal funds feed the military corporations and their subcontractors, providing the highest rate of guaranteed profit. A capitalist economy relies on brutal state repression, enforcing this private ownership of all the means of production, of all the resources. That's the role of the police and the courts and the largest prison system on the planet. It's the role of the Pentagon and the giant US-commanded NATO military alliance. They're the enforcers, 800 military bases around the world. They're the enforcers. With socialist planned production, China has enjoyed steady development for 75 years, without recessions, rock-bottom depressions that are a feature of every capitalist economy for centuries. In China, whose economy is still developing, the major productive forces are collectively owned. And since the decisions are not driven by profit, rational planning is possible. The Chinese Revolution shook the world. It aroused workers and peasants globally. It achieved victory in 1949, 75 years ago, October 1, because it was led by the Communist Party of China. They drove out the dominant imperialist powers that had looted China. The early accomplishments were made by a totally impoverished nation, but it opened the road to a new society. The CPC reorganized agriculture as well as basic industries. Every step forward required a mass mobilization involving the great energy of millions of people. They collectively built the basic schools and literacy programs, mass immunization, sanitation, irrigation, dams, infrastructure. They collectivized the land, and they enthusiastically broke the back of the old feudal landlord system. In an all-out effort to strangle this new society, the US and its allies walled off revolutionary China from Western trade and technology during its first 30 years. China's tasks were enormous and full of contradictions. It led to fierce debates within the party. In a world dominated by monopoly capital, things were also changing fast, and the leadership of the CPC became convinced that despite many heroic efforts, that the only way out of total isolation and to a new level of productivity and development was to reach an accord with the US and with Western imperialism. So 1978 marks the reform, the opening up. It was a compromise. After this decision to turn toward gaining access to Western technology and trade, China focused extensively on its own development and on gaining Western investment. This necessarily opened China's economy to hostile class elements. Western investment of money, machinery, technology, and skills flooded into China. And along with this, a capitalist class grew in China. Big capitalist corporate investors internationally assumed they'd be able to overturn China's socialist base. They were wrong, and now they are angry. So let's recognize the socialist base of the Chinese economy, the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party in building an economy of a new type. This phase of socialist construction is described by the CPC as market socialism, socialism with a market, socialism with Chinese characteristics. China explains that they are building towards socialism. They're in the primary stage of socialism, and that China is not yet a fully developed socialist country with equality for all. That's an honest evaluation of this long process of change. The Communist Party of China keeps firm political control over this complex and uneven process. The CPC has more than 90 million members. That's incredible. Its cells elected from the ranks from below are in every workplace, neighborhood, school, and department, and they are committed to defending socialist property and to protecting Chinese sovereignty. The key economic role is assigned to the state, a state controlled by the working class. Every major industry, especially banking, remains under state control, a state controlled by this massive Communist Party from the ranks on up. The central banks play a crucial role in subsidizing and developing key industries. Since there's little and no planning possible under capitalism, it can't solve the overarching problems that humanity faces on a global scale. So there's much more on this online. I will just close, and you can find me and find each of the speakers here online today. But I'll close by saying socialist economies based on planning and cooperation can solve many problems. So stepping up our defense of China, its revolution, and its accomplishments is necessary for the collective future of humanity. we'll close this opening panel with a talk from Zhang Weiwei, who is the director of the China Institute at Fudan University, and his talk is on China's leap of development in 75 years.
Hello, friends, comrades, and other guests. On the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, I'm more than happy to join you to celebrate this great occasion from Shanghai. In 75 years of socialist construction, China has become the world's largest economy by purchasing power parity since 2014. And today, China is the largest industrial, manufacturing, and trading nation with the world's largest middle class and extreme poverty eradicated and life expectancy 2 years higher than the United States. Furthermore, thanks to Chinese socialism, at the speed of accomplishing almost one industrial revolution every decade since the early 1980s, China is now at the fourth frontier of the fourth industrial revolution with big data, AI, and quantum technologies, etc. And now China is the only country capable of providing goods, services, and experience from all the four industrial revolutions to the whole world. All this has changed China forever and changed the world forever. Indeed, the first group of countries rising up during the 18th and 19th centuries, like Britain and France, had a population around tens of millions. The second group of countries rising up during the 20th century, like United States and Japan, had a population around 100 million. And China's rise in the 21st century represents a population of over 1 billion, which is more than the total populations of the previous two groups combined. Furthermore, China's stunning success has been achieved in peace and under socialism through the leadership of the Communist Party of China, rather than through wars and plunders and through colonialism or imperialism for the West. What's more important, China's rise is not that of an ordinary country, but that of a socialist civilizational state, which means China is an amalgam of the world's longest continuous civilization and super large modern socialist state, which has at least four features. That is, a super large population, a super vast territory, super long traditions, and super rich cultures, each of which is a blend of ancient and modern, more specifically, a blend of China's past and its modern socialist adaptations and innovations. Taking its super long traditions as an example, China's ancient traditions have evolved, developed, and adapted in virtually all branches of human knowledge and practices. For instance, the West is very critical of China's so-called one-party system. Yet, to most Chinese, it's nothing extraordinary. Since its first unification in 221 BC, China has been mostly governed by a unified ruling entity. Otherwise, the country would have become disintegrated. China had copied the American political model with adversarial political system following its 1911 Republican Revolution, and the country soon degenerated into chaos, into warlords fighting each other with millions of lives lost. In its history, China's unified ruling entity was mostly sustained by a system of meritocracy, with officials selected through public exams or the Keju system since the Sui dynasty close to 1,500 years ago. And since 1949, under the CPC's leadership, this ancient system has been adapted into today's what I call selection plus election model. China's top echelon leaders have almost all served at least twice as the number one of a Chinese province, which means they have administered, in most cases, more than 100 million people before taking up their current positions. As a result, China's top echelon leadership is obviously among the most competent and experienced in the world today. The tradition of a unified ruling entity has carried with it a holistic approach to political governance. I would describe Western-style political parties as partisan interest political parties, and the CPC as a holistic interest political party. This also explains why China is able to reform and reinvent itself all the time, pioneering a way to overcome all kinds of vested interests and ensure an overall balance between political power, social power, and power of capital in favor of the vast majority of the Chinese population. As a result, most Chinese are the real beneficiaries of China's dramatic transformation, a hallmark of Chinese socialism today. Of course, China is by no means perfect, and China is still faced with many challenges. Some are really daunting challenges. Yet I also believe that with China's extraordinary achievements over the past 75 years, China will be able to overcome these challenges and do perhaps even better in the years and the decades to come. On this positive note, I stop here and wish your celebration a great success. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
The third panel before our lunch today. And for the hundreds watching us on Zoom during the lunch, we'll have some video streaming that I think you'll find very interesting. Also, in closing this panel, I'll say that this is a book put out by the Friends of Socialist China called People's China at 75, The Flag Stays Red, and we will be holding in the coming weeks a book signing and a welcoming of this new book, People's China at 75, The Flag Stays Red, and it's made by the Friends of Socialist China and edited by Keith Bennett and Carlos Martinez. So we'll turn it over to Margaret Kimberly and panel number 2. Thank you.